Good evening. Let's stand and we'll open our service this evening with the hymn, I Know Whom I Have Believed.
Sure thankful we do not have to understand everything, aren't you? We can just simply commit it to Him and trust Him. I hope that you have that kind of confidence that the songwriter wrote about. I am persuaded that He's able to keep that which I've committed. It's something we ought to be absolutely convinced about. And God is certainly trustworthy. Oh, for grace to trust Him more. Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief. It's great to have each of you tonight. It'll be a much different service. And go through what we were able to accomplish in Pinedale. Some of you don't know much about that camp, and so I'll try to bring you up a little bit to speed as to what all happened, and that has resulted in our being over there for the last 4 years. Praise the Lord for those opportunities, but we will continue on. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Lord, I want to thank you for the day. Thank you so much for the truths that, Lord, we can confidently say that we know whom we've believed. We can confidently say that we are persuaded that you are able to keep what we've committed against that day. And Lord, we thank you for that. Thank you for the promise of that. I ask, Lord, tonight that you would be honored and glorified. I pray that you would challenge us as we study your word, and we thank you for this opportunity. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. You go ahead and be seated, Ryan.
Our next song will be A Shelter in the Time of Storm.
Weary land,
it's certainly taken on new meaning in recent days, and we're thankful for the Lord's protection here. I was out of touch so badly with internet and all of that. I thought the storm that was hitting you all had not yet hit Florida. And in the process of occasionally getting signal and not getting signal, Abby's like, I'm being sent up for 48 hours. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? And so then I'm like, well, where are you going up here? I'm like, oh, well, where is up here? So then I got nothing. And so then a little while later, I asked a second time, where is Abby going? What is going on? And lo and behold, I discovered what all was going on, and I was about 4 days behind. And so anyway, be in prayer for those who are up in the Northeast at this point. I know Heather's family is affected by the one currently that is hitting up in the New York area. Many already without power. We just want to pray for the Lord's protection on that, and certainly that he would use this to meet the spiritual needs of people as well, and the Lord can do so. Look ahead towards just a couple of things. On September the 5th, we will have a missionary with us. Look forward to Patrick Hayes being with us in the evening service. Following that, instead of a Labor Day picnic, we are going to instead have the opportunity for a fellowship Sunday evening after the service. And we'll have that opportunity down in the gymnasium, have a good time, and so look forward to that. Also, the addresses for our college students are located in the bulletin. It was good to see Matthew and Emma this morning, but we want to keep all of them in our prayers. All of this with COVID and everything going on, pray they're able to have a normal semester and continue to have classes in session. It is by far a much better situation. But of course, there's always, once you start getting the people together like this, there's more than likely going to be the outbreaks of that. And so let's just keep them in our prayers, that the Lord would protect them, and the Lord would just give them a great semester as well. And we'll look forward to hearing what the Lord's done for them. There will be a picnic down at Ambassador on the 22nd. Amy and I will be attending that. Be in prayer for that. The Lord would direct. I said 22nd, 24th. Today's the 22nd. And so we'll be in prayer for that. But also the opportunity just that the Lord would direct whatever students the Lord may have for us, if any. And we certainly want His will on that. So just make that a matter of prayer. Also in the process of we've got several dates that have been out there for the emergency services dinner. I've not yet gotten confirmation back on which specific dates are going to work. Just be in prayer for that as well, right?
The moral of Dan's story is he was so far out on the sticks, live television reached him 3 days later. And he's still trying to catch up. That's funny. Our next song will be He Hideth My Soul. excellent singing. Let's finish day by day as we stand, day by day.
You go ahead and be seated. I would like you to turn in your Bibles tonight to Colossians chapter number 4. We'll be there eventually, but I want to do a little bit, probably more. We might describe this as a little bit more of a devotional. I want to bring you up to speed with where we were and what all we were able to accomplish. Lord was good to us this past week. He granted us safety and really allowed us to accomplish quite a bit. And we are certainly very thankful for that. It's always good when you're running lots of saws and things like that to come home with all of the limbs and appendages that you went with. And we did so. And I only know of one who shot himself with a nail gun. And it wasn't too bad, so we were thankful for that. But nonetheless, it was a good time. We went with a group, and Michael and I are going to hopefully get on the same page by the end of the night. We'll see how this works out. We'll be easy on Michael because this is challenging. I can't advance it. I'm going to step off a little bit to the side. This is the group that we were able to go with. IBBI is the name of the group, Independent Baptist Builders International. They're based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And we actually had 18 go this time, 3 ladies, and 5 different churches were represented, most of them in the Atlanta area. One church was in Wisconsin near Maranatha, and they met us out there as well, but had a great time, and honestly enjoyed a great time of fellowship. We flew into Salt Lake City, drove about 4 hours then to a small town called Pinedale, Wyoming. I would encourage you to look it up. That's about the only way I can describe it. If you look in Wyoming, it's in the western side of it, about central part, just south of Yellowstone National Park. We got there to this camp. It is Red Cliff Bible Camp. Originally, wanted to give you an idea of what we were looking at, and Michael advanced that to the next one. This was their original lodge, a little bit challenging, I think, to see just because of the sunlight. This lighter section of roof was the original lodge that was built back in 1980-something. They added on this larger part here, a 2-story part. If I'm remembering correctly, they finished it and dedicated that somewhere in the year 2000, 2001, if I'm remembering correctly. In 2017, they came up to this next scene, and this was that same lodge, and it burned to the ground. February of 2017, somebody had checked on it on Monday, and they came back later on in the week on Wednesday. It was fine on Monday. but this was that exact same lodge. You look at it and you see snow that is piled up to here. This is the entryway. That particular year, they had 23 feet of snow, and that time they had 10 feet of snow still stacked around the building. They literally carved steps out to go down into the different buildings to be able to get into those. It was actually God's providence, because what happened was, as that building burned, it was essentially like a campfire in a bunch of snow, and it contained itself and just simply fell in. This next slide gives you a little bit of a picture of just the extent of the damage, and it was completely destroyed. You see the lines in the concrete. I don't know, you've heard me talk about the building blocks that we use. They're called ICF, and they're kind of neat, actually. It's like building those Legos. They're styrofoam, and they've got little webbing inside of them, 4 foot long, and you just interlock them. And then the walls are filled with concrete. The fire was so hot that it actually melted all of that off the wall and exposed it all the way down to the concrete. To give you another idea of how hot the fire was, I learned this last time, that a toilet, a porcelain toilet, actually melted and got into some of the water and so forth that was there. So that gives you an idea of the fire. The questions have always been asked: what caused the fire? Nobody knows. And this was, however, the scene that they found on Wednesday. They were going up to prepare camp that was supposed to start, if I'm remembering correctly, on Friday of that particular week. It was either a Friday or a Monday, and they were just getting ready for one of their camps. And so obviously it set things back and was quite the blow to them emotionally and mentally. Here they are serving the Lord, and this camp is, Pinedale is the town that's about it takes us an hour to get from Pinedale up to this camp. The camp is located at 8,600 feet. I think Pinedale is about 8,000 feet, and so you're up there quite a bit. Absolutely beautiful area, but when they get up there, this is all of a sudden what they see. I think one of the challenges that we would all be faced with is, at what point in time would you stop serving the Lord? At what point in time would you continue? Here was a man by the name of Dean Loftus, who has been the director of the camps for over 30 years now at this time, and he determines, you know what, let's rebuild. In fact, he's taken the statement "beauty through ashes," and or "beauty for ashes," rather, and this is what they're doing, and it's based out of Isaiah, I believe it's chapter number 61. That all of that takes place. And so work began, and they eventually got it cleared away. Just a remarkable story, the amount of equipment that was donated. Jackhammer on the track hoe breaks, and lo and behold, they get a new jackhammer that is donated up there for that. A big, huge dump truck like the size you would see in a mine, for example, that size truck, just buried in the mud. And they went ahead and, if I'm thinking correctly, it was Komatsu that heard of them. But anyway, they donated a track dump truck for them to be able to dump all of the materials. Just God provided just so many things, and I don't have time to get into all of that. Well, this next slide is going to be the lodge that we've been working on, and so I've been involved in all 4 stages of that. When we got there originally, we were dealing on this first level, and they had the walls up. Unfortunately, we had to take about 3 courses of that wall down to redo the rebar, because the inspector said, or the architect said, no, you've got to have a lot of stuff up above the windows. And so that was what we did year 1. And it was quite the project. The contractor that was there, he and his 2 sons said, well, if we have to do this, it's going to take us at least 3 to 4 weeks. Our crew went in there, and we were able to knock that out in a week, and they were able to continue pouring the walls. Year 2, we went back, and that time we were on the 2nd floor, and we installed those walls. They were supposed to have all of the flooring done on that year. They didn't, and we got there, and we were supposed to just get the 2nd-story walls up. Well, we got probably a third of the 2nd-story floor in, as well as most of the walls for the 2nd story, and that was that year. Third year we went, you see that upper deck that is going all the way across. It doesn't look like much. I don't know how long the building is. I'm thinking it's 300 feet or somewhere around there. But the dimensions between the building and the outside of that porch is about 20 feet. And so all that we accomplished, and when I say all, that was still a tremendous amount on that third year, was we got all of the framing up for that decking. They had the roof on. The pillars were all set. All of those have been hewn logs. It is really a magnificent facility, and it's absolutely going to be beautiful. So that's what we approached Sunday. These pictures were taken. While I was doing that, we also had a couple of guests show up. That was one of them. And Wyoming is a little bit of a unique state in the fact that the cattle are free-ranging. And there are certain limitations as to where they can go, but they had this nice little bull around. And while I was taking his picture, I heard a bunch of rustling in the woods, and lo and behold, his buddy showed up. He was a lot closer. And thankfully, it's kind of ironic because normally a bull is going to be extremely territorial. They weren't. Of course, there weren't any cows around either. There was just those two guys, and they were just hanging out. In fact, the day before, on Saturday, at least one of them, was actually inside the building. And so he was just inspecting things. They were quite skittish, which was a little bit ironic to me. I'm not used to that. If I had been in a normal farm setting and saw him right there looking at me like that, I would have been backing up very slowly. And but that wasn't the case here. We started, and essentially we move on into some of the next pictures. This would be the decking that we had, or the framing that we had originally installed. This is the front deck. And so by the time we got there, they had already installed all of the Trex. That was actually done last year. Looks extremely sharp. The next picture is going to give us a little bit of some of the metal soffit that was up there. And again, that was done prior to us arriving there. We move on to the next one, and this is going to be primarily where we worked. This was on the back side of the building, and there were 3 different crews. This was where Kelly and I were essentially the entire time, and the goal is to get a deck that is going to go all the way across. And we did not accomplish that, unfortunately, and there were a number of reasons for that. Michael, advance to the next one, and this is going to give you a little bit of a dimension, perspective of the size of the building. And these beams were much shorter. Instead of dealing with 20-foot ones that we had to lift with basically a machine and a strap, these were 10-foot ones, and actually, Kelly and I lifted them and got them into place. They'd get one end up to Kelly on the scaffolding, and I'd walk the other end up the ladder, and down the road we went. And so we succeeded with that. We move on to the next one, and that's going to be this backside. This little wall right here, I'm not going to have a grand picture of that. It'll come up here in just a little bit because that's a wall that we end up pouring a little bit. This section right here would be the kitchen, and that's the section they end up putting a roof on. We go on to the next one, and day number 1, the first thing we had to do was install one of these brackets right here. It's going to hold 2 beams, and we had to get one up onto the corner, and so that was the very first thing we did. Cut away all the foam, stick some bolts in there, drill into the concrete, stick some bolts in there that are epoxied in there, then that has to set. And so that's set for the next day. We continued on that particular day, and we actually started in on some of these next beams. Michael, you can advance it. And this gives you a little bit of an idea of what we were doing. These are the beams that go in. So one goes here. These are 3 inches by 18, rough cut timber, and it is solid timber. I can assure you of that. Each one is getting 2 sections. There would eventually be one here, and we were starting that process in this one. Then as we were doing this, there needed to be a roof that was going to go over that section of the kitchen. And so we could not do the beams there, and so they began installing this particular header here, and that started. This is while we're working outside. Michael, move on to the next one, and this gives you a little bit of an idea of what they were doing. And so they're installing all of this while we're working outside on the beams. They had to get this because the decking is going to go just like within probably 3 inches of the bottom of those beams, and so it was necessary that we at least get this amount done. We go on to the next one, and Kelly and I are hanging. This is now onto the back, the other side of that. We've gotten these two up in place, and it gives you a little bit of an idea of what we were doing. We go to the next one, and this is putting in all of the floor joists. There again is that wall that I mentioned, so this is now to the right side of that building, and we got all of these in. One more slide. And this gives you a little bit of an idea of what we were at on the end of Monday. And we had accomplished this much. All of these were in. You can't tell, but the decking is actually on that roof all the way across. These brackets that are located right here are going to be ultimately holding the beams that are there. Next one will give you a little bit of a different angle of this as well. Again, we're back here. That little wall I was telling you is going to be located in this particular corner. We're thinking everything looks good. Michael, move on. And all of a sudden we ran into a problem. All of this work we had done Monday. We undid Tuesday. And it was like, man, you got to be kidding me. The problem was that there was a stairway that is going to be going up to them. The individual at the camp picked up on the fact that, wait a minute, we don't have headroom for a stairwell. And the architect missed it, or the engineer missed it. I think it was the engineer missed it, and the architect just glossed over it. Or it's the other way around, and I don't remember which. But nonetheless, the result was it was essentially something that kind of slipped through the cracks. And he's like, wait a minute, we need to adjust this. And so we pulled out all of the joists that we had put in the day before in those two sections. And this particular one, which was originally extending all the way out to this post, was shortened to a width of only 4 feet. When we were talking about that 20-foot beam that I've told you about that was in Oregon, what was supposed to happen was we were having a beam going here, through here, and to this point. So that would box all of that off. If we had gotten that, we would have been able to have laid the decking on that upper part. That beam, however, was nowhere to be found near us, and so nonetheless, it is what it is, and so we ended up essentially having to kind of make some adjustments. A handprint there at the concrete, I don't think anybody died there, but it is kind of comical when you see it looks like they just smeared on down the wall. That was none of us. I will say this, however, it was nice to have the concrete poured all the way around that porch. We had previously been setting the ladders up in all the mud, and it just adds another dimension to it. And when I say mud, I'm not talking like, just a little bit of mud. I'm talking like inches of mud that you'll step into, and it just really adds another dimension to that. All right, Michael, move on. Thank you. This would be the work now that was undone here. All of that was taken out. This one was shortened, and you see we were able now this next day, and this is probably going to be on Tuesday. We would have gotten these installed. This has been up now. The short one was installed. We just put a brace under that to keep that, and then we were also able to get these beams installed across there. That was as far as we were able to get, as far as we weren't able to do the decking there. Unfortunately, just wasn't able to work out. We move on to the next one, and this is now, we were looking at the front side of the building, that original slide, this would be the far left end. It would be the big black Angus bull came trucking out of these woods right here. And so this is on the far left end. They have to do a fire suppression system. It's kind of an interesting thing. It is gravity fed. And they've got massive tanks that are located up. If you keep going up their property goes up quite a ways in elevation, but those tanks are buried up there and piped all the way down, and they put valves in this particular room. This was an addition they weren't expecting. It was originally supposed to go inside the facility itself, and there just simply was not going to be sufficient room. So man and his son, about a week or two before we got there, built this block wall, and then another crew that was with us that did that roof going over the kitchen part, then they came the next day and began this roof. Michael advanced that, and I'll give you an idea of what these guys were doing. Essentially, it's going to end up going right below these windows up here, and then it touches all the way down there. We can advance to the next one as well. This is Chuck Clute. He is the director of IBBI. This is his second year. He flies with Delta Airlines. Great guy. And Thomas Schaefer had been the one previously. I don't know how long he was there. It had been quite a while. Thomas was also on this trip. Great guy also. Thomas is pushing 80 and just said, I'm going to probably hand over the reins as far as being in charge of this. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he is still on the board. But Chuck has taken the reins of that. Great man. And really did a phenomenal job in the leadership of this, coordinating the different teams and all of that. We move on, and this would give you a perspective of some of what they did. This is the underneath side, and this is the top side. That's going to be by the end of Tuesday that they would have gotten to that point. We move on to the next day, and this is Wednesday. They were able to get it sheeted, and this man right here is just a real funny character. And he and I would joke all the time, named Travis, and just a great guy, do anything for you, and just hilarious. He is just one of those guys. But nonetheless, did a great job on this. We move on, and then by the end of that day, they had it dried in, and it's ready to put the metal on. We did not do that. That's going to be where that roof stops at that point. We move on to the next one, and this was what we did Wednesday. Kelly was the fearless operator for the mixer. And this is another guy, that's not me, but he's up. Give you an idea, that wall that I had mentioned before, what we've done is we've added about 3 feet of that styrofoam block. And then it was filling that with concrete. So we took 80-pound bags and mixed that. Kelly got to handle every single one of them. I did not. We move on to the next one, and there I am looking like a madman, but this gives you an idea of the setup. We'd dump it into the wheelbarrow. I'd scoop it into 5-gallon buckets, hand it to him or him. He'd hand it up to him, and then we'd dump it. And we would repeat that process. I think it was somewhere around 50 bags, roughly, that it took for us to do that. It was about a 2 to 2.5 hour project. I think we did about 10, and we're like, all right, how far are we? I think we'd gone up about 3 inches. And it's like, okay, let's move your hand up that wall a little bit, and let's ask this question again. How far are we? And they go, oh, yeah, we're all the way up to here. That's great. That's what we want to hear. It took quite a while, but we did eventually get it, and we were able to get that wall poured. Move on to the next one. That gives you an idea, the dust, and it was just a joyful occasion. And it was just a blessing. Rain outside somewhat off and on. This would be Wednesday. It was off and on Wednesday, but wasn't too bad. We move on. And later on in the day, this is now, if you're looking at the building, this is the far right side. We had 2 guys who were installing that. Kelly and I were cutting and handing that up. This is more of that metal soffit that you saw over that porch. And so that was going up there. That's probably... they're probably pushing at least 20 feet or so in that area as far as your height, maybe more than that, might be 25 by the time we're actually getting up that high. So it was absolutely going to be a beautiful facility. We move on to the next one, and then after we finished those 2 bays, we actually went over top of this deck, and we started finishing out the soffit. We were able to finish it all the way to the end of the deck, and we were going to continue that the next day. They changed projects, however, for us to do, and so that at least got that metal all the way out there. You see all of this is all the fire suppression system. All of these little nozzles here, all of those would take a 2-inch hole saw and measure, and hopefully we guessed correctly, drill through the metal, and up it goes. And then you've got a bunch of electrical boxes for lights and things like that all along through there. And so it was just constant drilling and constant cutting and entertaining, to say the least. We move on, and this gives us your view Thursday. This is an absolutely beautiful camp, the setting of this, but the snow did not quite reach us, but it did reach very close to us. That's the mountain. Last year we were there. We watched it go down that mountain, come across the trees, and then hit us. This year we allowed it to stay up on the mountain. Snowed a couple times, but it was more or less off and on. And it didn't really affect us. It would snow for a while. You could feel the air change. You'd feel the air change and probably drop about 10 degrees. And it'd be like, oh boy, here we go again. And it would start off with the snow and then a snow-sleet mix, and then it turned to rain. And then we did that several times throughout the day on Thursday. But again, just an absolutely beautiful setting. This would be when this camp is built. And this, if you're looking from the front across the property, that's what you see. And even then, there's several mountains. They're all covered by the clouds at this point, but it is a beautiful setting. Move on. And we went on then on, let's see, what day am I up to at this point? I guess at this point I am on Friday. Let's see, yeah, this would be Friday. So what we've done now, because we had to wait once we poured that concrete on Wednesday, it needed to set up. Well, when your temperatures are down into the low 40s, high 30s, it takes a little while for all that to happen. It's set up enough for us on Wednesday that we could go ahead and set a board that would, and this would be on that wall. The wall is going to be right underneath here, connecting out here to this pillar. We were able to set up the board on that would allow us to then run all the joists, and so we finished that section. Move on to the next one, and then we were able to put down some decking. This would be Friday afternoon. We finished, I think we quit working somewhere around 3:30 because we cleaned up for dinner in town that particular night. So that was as far as the decking. This gives you a little bit of an idea. This is on the far edge of that wall. These are the two bays here. This blank space in between is where that roof is for the kitchen. Then we go all the way to the other side, and that's where we needed the 20-foot beam and so forth. So we were able to get some of the decking done. We were thankful for that. Move on. While we were there, there was a third crew, and they were inside of a cabin. And what they were doing was building the walls for the bathrooms. We'll advance through these fairly quickly. Go ahead and go to the next one, Michael. This is going to give you a little bit of an idea just simply of the framing of some of this, what they did, and move on to this as well. Eventually, and this, they didn't have, they received it was either $20,000 or $25,000 donation from a former camper. And he labeled it infrastructure, and he said the reason I want it called that is because nobody wants to say, well, I just want my money to go to a sewer line and water lines. But that's essentially what it ended up doing, and it allowed for water and all of that to be to these cabins. Our first year out there, one cabin had a bathroom, okay, a toilet. I don't remember if we had a shower or not, but there were many, many outhouses. Year two, neither of our cabins had, because camp was still going on. So we got the outhouses and we got a shower trailer that is scheduled. Essentially, they were looking at a shower trailer that was going to cost them about $25,000 to $30,000. They went, bought a car hauler trailer, and put their own showers in it for about $10,000. And so that was what we used that year. In the last 2 years, we've pretty well lived the dream. We've had a toilet and a shower in there. And so we were thankful. I did learn. Those of you who had the outhouses in your lifetime, you all can have those. But the plastic porta-johns were a whole lot better than those wooden outhouses. The wooden ones, oh my goodness, you could not hold your breath long enough to be inside one of those. Those things soak up stuff from years, and it didn't matter. It's like we were almost ready to take up a donation just to say, will you come please pump this thing and get this cleaned out? It'd curl your nose hairs. It was so bad. But nonetheless, we were making progress, and we were getting a bathroom into here. We move on to the next one, and this was a pastor in Wisconsin. He and a couple of his church members were there. He was in on this project. We move on to the next one. He was also there, Neil Waddell. Neil wrote a tract. He had a love for old cars. I'll bring the tract, but he wrote a tract on Route 66 and talked about his love for cars and being sure you're on the right road that's going to lead to heaven. It was quite the fascinating tract, and we may end up purchasing some. This was another fellow. They were there working on this, and this is still the bathroom walls going up. Move on, and each of these would have, they're very nice inside, to be quite honest, and they would have this pine board that they would nail all the way around it, and that's what's going to be the outside of that. We move on, and there's Thomas Schaefer. Thomas was the one who was previous there. Yes, we even had a lady working on the construction part, and she was there. The other two ladies were in the kitchen, but they were nailing all of this siding on. This gives you an idea of the layout with the bunks. I've talked about the 3 bunk beds and so forth. Some of you recall the story. One of my years out there, I dreamed that the scissor lift was stuck. And I was going up, and up, and up, and up, and up. And I was sleeping on this middle bunk bed. And it was stuck going up. And as I'm going up, I'm getting closer and closer and closer to the roof. And so the switch wouldn't turn off. And so I bailed. Well, I bailed out of that middle bunk, and I rolled over, and I hit everything. There's a ladder here. I hit that. I hit my arm on the top. I hit my head on stuff. I flew out onto that floor and stood there looking like an idiot. I woke up the entire cabin, 13 guys looking at me like, what are you doing? I just need to go to the bathroom, guys. And went to the bathroom, came back, and it's like, well, I dreamed the scissor lift. By that point in time, everyone's laughing, and even to this day, even on this particular trip, that story came up once again. So if you're ever in those middle bunks, you talk about claustrophobic, though, those are some tight ones. You roll over, and you're hitting all sorts of stuff. But nonetheless, that's their setup, and we move on, Michael. And this is just some more of that. Donna was a great lady. She did a lot of things here and just really was willing to get right in and do that. We move on. And we get a couple of the installation things. This is going to be inside. Neil's working on the electrical. This gives you an idea. Door's not on, but that's the finished look. And they've done a very good job on these. Move on, and there's the hole to get into the sewer. You can see someone, that's Thomas, or did I say sewer, into the underneath to where you can run all the plumbing. It was not an easy fit, but Thomas was in there. Go ahead and move to the next one. This is a picture where Chuck just stuck his phone down there and took a picture. That's pretty accurate, pretty good. And that's exactly what happened. That's Thomas again, and he is down there gluing the pipe. Gives you a little bit of an idea, some of the tightness of that. Move on. And these were 4 ladies that served in the kitchen. The 2 here to the left, this is a mother-daughter combination, Allison and Julie. They came from Rock Springs, which would be about 100 miles away, 120 miles away. And they came up, they were there. These 2 ladies were from Wisconsin. This is actually the pastor's daughter here, Hannah. And they just did a great job. They kept the food going all week long and did a phenomenal job. The food that we ate, it was just very enjoyable. You didn't sit there and be like, oh, great, we got to eat again. They did a phenomenal job. Kept the kitchen going, and so we were certainly very thankful for that. Move on to the last one, and this was some would say, well, what was my highlight this year? It would definitely be the devotionals. I had the opportunity each week or each night to go through these. We're going through this same devotional in the adult Sunday school class. When I get the booklets printed this week, I will put them available for everyone on the back table. It is something that you can go through. But it was a study that I didn't know. I sensed it was the Lord's direction. I thought about a number of the components on this for about a year or a year and a half, and just didn't really sense that it was the right timing prior to, and this particular time I did sense that was the Lord's direction, and the sense of it is absolute timeless truths for life. And so it goes along the lines, for example, God's way is always perfect, God's timing is always best, God's grace is always sufficient. Certain truths that you just really have to anchor your life to. And so we're going through that. We just started it this morning in my adult Sunday school class. I'll have the books available for all of you. I don't want all of you to just simply jump in on that. But what I came to find out was the needs that were there that I had no idea were there. And we would have devotionals about 7:30 or so at night, and I would typically be done by 8 or 8:15, but then oftentimes found myself talking with someone afterwards for quite some time. The devotions prompted a number of questions. The conversations that I found myself involved in, I would never have anticipated on a trip such as this. But questions that were prompted by the devotional, individuals going through things saying, oh, look, you mean to tell me that what God's doing in my life is perfect? Yeah, I do. And I had some very neat opportunities to continue that both throughout the day while we were working, before dinner, during dinner, after the devotional. I was honestly just amazed. And I had more opportunities from a ministry standpoint on this particular retreat than I've ever had on the previous ones. Not that the previous ones had very few. That's not what I'm saying. I just had that many opportunities here. And I would say they were divine appointments, to be honest. There were things that I found myself answering questions to for situations that I was completely oblivious to. Others within the group were not, but I was completely oblivious to them and found myself questioning, where is this coming from and why is this? And then you start putting, this kind of the general tone of questions by certain individuals, and you'd start getting a feel for, man, this one's really struggling here. And this one's going through a lot. And found out God's timing is always best, for example, on this particular one. And one of the young men that was with us, his wife, and he had just gotten news that day that his wife is going to have spinal surgery here on September the 22nd, and so, or 21st, or I think it's the 2nd. And, it was the perfect timing. I could not have coordinated that. That was a God thing. And God did that repeatedly throughout this time, and was just so thankful for the opportunities that we had, the opportunities that I had to make a difference in their lives on a spiritual standpoint, not just simply the physical. I would encourage you to pray for the camp, Red Cliff Bible Camp. You can follow them on Facebook. It's just amazing. They had $16,000 worth of sheetrock that was, if I'm remembering correctly, and I wish Kelly were here, I know he's watching online, that was donated to them. Okay, that's $16,000 worth of sheetrock that's sitting in that building. Then they've got a contractor who is going to hang it and finish it. That is a huge blessing because it is a tremendous amount of sheetrock. They've had Christians who are just on different components of the project. They own for example, the electrical stuff. There was a camper years ago that was there. Well, he ended up involved with Square D. They make the breakers. And then he ended up over another department, and to the point where he is able to reduce their cost to this, to the point that Dean said we were paying 75% of cost. Okay? They were losing 25%. But this guy that they had ministered to years ago had such a heart for this camp that he was able, and is high enough up in the organization that he's able to do this, to the point that the contractor, look, I don't know where in the world you're getting this for this cost. And it's a God thing. And Dean consistently would say, this is a God thing. They've had over 300 yards of concrete that have been put in that building. And concrete right now is you're probably $100 to $150 a yard on this. The first year, the concrete was free. Then it was half cost. I mean, it's just time after time after time. They've had hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations, and it has just been amazing to see how God has just continued to bless and continued to meet their needs. They are hoping and praying to be able to have a dedication ceremony on the 24th. We're already looking at going out there next year again, and hopefully seeing what the Lord has for us. But it's been neat to see, and it's been encouraging for us to see. Well, I told you to go to Colossians chapter number 4, and we'll be simple here tonight, but Several things came to my mind, several passages came to my mind. This was one of them that was actually shared with me by another one. But I thought it was very fitting for us tonight. Another thing that I had considered, and we won't take the time to get into it tonight, is in Matthew chapter 25. If you're going through our devotionals, you just read that recently. And the section where the individuals are given the various talents and what they use those things for. Well, Colossians chapter 4, I want you to notice verse number 17. As Paul is drawing this letter to a close, he writes this and says, "And say to Archippus, take heed to the ministry which thou hast received in the Lord, that thou fulfill it." We don't really know much about this man by the name of Archippus. In fact, it was a fairly common name, believe it or not, but we do find his name mentioned in the book of Philemon, and that has caused some to speculate. Perhaps he was a part of Philemon's household. We simply do not know. But there was a specific direction that was given to him. And here was the direction, and it was this: take heed to the ministry which thou hast received in the Lord, that thou fulfill it. The words take heed would be a command that would suggest direct your attention to this. This is something that is going to devote or demand attention be given to this. It's not something that we just pass over. It's not something that we just ignore. And it's not something that we pretend does not exist. Take heed to the ministry that you have received in the Lord. So pay attention, direct your attention to this service that you have been given in the Lord. I've shared many times, and I believe it with all of my heart, that there is no such thing as a believer who has not been given a gift through which he is to minister to a church. It's an unbiblical thing. God has equipped every single person in here. He's given us all unique talents and abilities. I went with a crew of 18. There were young people there, teenagers, who are extremely gifted in construction. There are older people there who have not been gifted as much in construction, but they've been gifted in other areas. Nuts and bolts, for example. Boy, did that come in handy on this trip. Okay? There were people gifted with their abilities in cooking, gifted with all sorts of things. Then there were those who were just willing to do whatever. Push a broom if necessary, whatever the case might be. But my point is, it wasn't that everyone had the same ability or even the same degree of ability, but God equipped people. When we stepped back from that project, we actually accomplished more than we set out to accomplish. We had hoped to get the decking on that one section. The Lord didn't allow that, but the Lord allowed us to put a lot of soffit up. They were 1 stick short of 3/4 inch and 1 stick short of 1/2 inch copper of plumbing the water in. It was only expected that we get the walls up. That's it. So we were able to go beyond. Why? Because God equipped this group, and this group was exactly this time, and it's been the same every other time, with exactly what was needed for that. But I want to challenge you, because God's equipped this church with the same thing. God has given each one of us unique abilities. He's given us each opportunities that only you have, people that you can reach, gifts that you have. We may share in some aspects of that, but the degree to which we have them may very well be different. And so here the instruction is to this man, about whom we know very little: pay attention, or direct your attention to the ministry that you have been given. Don't worry about everybody else. You are not accountable for them. We go to that passage in Matthew 25 that I had considered going to with the talents. The one who had received 5 talents, the one who had received 2 talents, and the one received 1. It didn't matter how many he had. The one who got 5 was responsible for those 5. The one who got 2 was responsible for those 2. The one who got 1 was responsible for that 1. So the one who got 1 wasn't accountable for as though he had 5. This was what he was given. You have been given as well gifts by God to serve him, to further his work. But unfortunately, we get so caught up in the temporal things, and we get all focused on needing to make more money and needing to do this and needing to get that and purchase this and fix this, that we lose sight of the eternal work that we are doing. Throughout this week, we constantly referenced the concept that and prayed frequently in the meals and various things. The work that we are doing, we're not just building a structure. We're putting something up that can be used for God's honor and for God's glory. You're putting up a structure that, Lord willing, will see countless children's lives come into that ministry and be touched. See people saved. See people's lives transformed. That's the work we were doing. The 2x4s and the sheetrock and the beams and all of those things are just the temporal part of that. There's a much bigger perspective. I challenge you tonight to look at the perspective of ministry. It's not about, though facilities are important, it is not primarily driven by this aspect of facilities. Ministry is people-oriented. And as believers, we can never lose sight of this reality. God has equipped us with certain gifts to further His kingdom in the lives of people, not in the walls of structures. But far too often, we have lost sight of that. Take heed, direct your attention to the ministry that you have received. So I ask you tonight, what ministry then have you been given by God? How has God equipped you? How has God gifted you? Direct your attention to that. In order that, he says, that thou fulfill it. That you bring it to its completion. That you bring it to its intended end. So then, once we identify what it is that God has given us and how God has equipped us, the next question then that we have to ask is, are we faithfully carrying it out? Are we doing what God has called us to do as individuals? You have been gifted by God. So direct your attention to that gift in order that you might fulfill it, in order that you might bring it to its completion, in order that God might take it and use it to satisfy and accomplish His divine purpose. That's why we're here. That's why we gather in church. That's why we gather in corporate fellowships and things like that. But it's also why we have to focus on our own individual lives spiritually. So I would ask you then tonight, how has God gifted you? 18 men over the course of 5 days drove hammers, drilled screws, messed with bolts and wood and all sorts of stuff. Different gifts, different abilities. But God used each one of us to advance His kingdom. It's the same picture that's described of the local body of believers in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, where it's compared to a body. This particular member or part functions this way. This one functions this way. The hand doesn't have to function like the foot. The eyes don't function like the nose. We're all gifted uniquely. So don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Focus on what God's called you to do. Take what God's called you to do and bring it to its intended end. Don't stop short. Fulfill it. Fulfill it to the best of your ability. Don't do as the one who had one talent went and hid it in the earth. And when it was time for the reckoning to occur, he had done nothing with it. There are too many Christians who are content to do nothing with that which God has given them. I believe the biblical principle can be established in Matthew 25 that when an individual uses what God has given him, God will give him more. But when an individual chooses not to use it, I believe it's also established from that passage that he can lose what God has given him. Don't lose it. Use it for His honor and for His glory. We had a great week. It was a week where I met people I would never have imagined. And I had opportunities that I would never have imagined. And it was something to see. And this was God's doing. It was a work that He was behind. And we just were simply parts of it. But it's the same thing when you wake up tomorrow and go to work. When I come to the office, it's the exact same thing. This is the work to which God has called us to. Let's be found faithful. Let's bring it to its intended end. Let's stand. We'll be dismissed just simply tonight by a word of prayer. Thank you for joining. I hope this has given you a little bit of an idea of what we were doing, maybe a little bit of a perspective. I would encourage you to pray for Dean Loftus. He is the camp director. His wife, Lori, her is it mom or dad? I think it was her dad, is not doing well. One of them recently passed. The other one was not doing well, and so they've had some challenges with that as well. But just be in prayer for them. Pray for wisdom for that camp, that the Lord would meet the needs and that they'd be able to see that work come to pass. Let's close with a word of prayer. Lord, I thank you for this day. Thank you so much for this opportunity to just simply share a little bit of what you've done. Lord, thank you for your work. Thank you for the privilege of serving you, and I pray that each one of us would direct our attention to the ministry that you've given us so that, Lord, we would bring it to its intended end. Lord, help us to be faithful, and I pray you would accomplish your will, and we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Lord willing, I'll see you on Wednesday night. Take care, and God bless.